Good morning. Welcome to Taiwan, eastern edge of Hong Kong Island. We're here at新桂香, probably the best char siu in town. Let's see what's happening at the back. Welcome to the kitchen. So, chefs are putting together the char siu. They're skewering it with these metal skewers that are going to allow them to hang inside of that vertical oven. Skewering the pork on the thicker end so that they can hang, cook, render. Skewering the pork this way allows them to cook relatively evenly since there's cut into thick slabs. In most of American butchery, it all comes from one part of the pig, but actually there's a lot of texture differentiation, whether it's fattiness, leanness, but also the crispness and I suppose the snappiness of that type of pork. A little bit of soaked newspaper on the top of the char siu to stop it from burning. All of this is to control the temperature to affect the final texture of the char siu. All the char siu is inside of the oven, all the different cuts you can see. Chef has linked some of it together as a little bit of manipulation because at the end of the day, the cooking is constant, the fire is constant. So the way that this cooks is entirely dependent on the positioning of the pork, whether it's lower, close to the flame, which is actually a little bit cooler, or if it's hotter over the top. Generally speaking, he says the leaner cuts towards the top, fattier cuts towards the bottom. You want low temperature to render out all that fat, but the leaner cut can actually take a little bit more heat and they can cook a little bit longer. This is going to be the first 25 to 30 minutes or so, and then he's going to check, flip them over, rotate a little bit, and then readjust, add Maltose, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
These guys open for business at 8, but it really starts to get busy around lunchtime. 5個字啦，係咪差唔多? Oh my goodness. First roast is done. 咁即間窿窿地嗰啲就即間係批㗎嘛？
我燒埋第二次先至。
燒成點啊？覺得今日 OK 啊！佢其實本身已經係自己係紅紅地，唔落色㗎嘛。
冇落色㗎，全部都係靠個火逼出嚟。
So this is the leaner parts. This is the part that's going to be a little bit drier but less fatty. Down here, this is the first cut. Over here, there's the fattier bits, super tender, encased in a little bit of fat. I mean, this is all the range of texture. You can start to see it come together as the char siu is being cooked. A little bit of char, that's part of the charm. He's letting it rest for a couple of minutes before it goes inside of the Maltose. It's going to cool down, it's going to glaze, and it's going to go back inside of the oven for that final glaze. And there you go. Maltose glaze. Maltose, also known as malt sugar, is an alternative to honey in a lot of places, but that is the original sugar used to glaze char siu. When you're adding maltose to the char siu, it's going to glaze the outside and it's going to cling onto the pork a little bit better than honey. Maltose gives it a nice, clear, crisp glisten. Dude, this is so sexy. Jesus Christ. That maltose is so thick, it's going to cling to the char siu as it roasts, even at slightly higher temperatures. It's going to caramelize on the outside. It might pick up a little bit of char, it might burn just a little bit, but that's crisp, and that's what us Hong Kong people like. Now's the time for the second cook of the char siu. These skewers positioned at different parts of the pork are going to keep everything flat so that he can get as consistent of a cook as he can. The chef's starting to marinate the char siu for the day. The first roast is actually meat that's been marinated the night before. So sugar, there goes some salt, a little bit of five spice being those warming spices, cinnamon, clove, anise, so into those. A little bit of sand ginger powder, everything mixed together like a dry rub. So this is soybean paste. In Cantonese barbecue restaurants, this is known as samzhe, raw sauce. But really, it's a fermented soybean paste that has been pulverized until it's smooth. And here comes a little bit of additional rose wine. This is sorghum wine infused with a little bit of rose. That rose wine gives it a little bit of light floralness to bolster that sweetness. Along with everything else inside of the sauce, it becomes a very sweet and savory profile. That savoriness comes primarily from soybeans. The key here is to get everything even. It's a combination of a dry and a wet rub. This marinade time is so important for that pork to be juicy. 你知唔知咧？其實我一開始做即係想學煮嘢嘅時候咧，我細個16歲嘅時候咧，喺柴灣呢個名埗嗰度，名埗工廠嗰度咧學人搞私房菜。細個嘅時候，嗰陣時開始食你哋新桂香。係咩？嗰時20幾年前。你幾多歲開始做嗰時？10零歲。10零歲開始做。之後做，你話做咗40幾年啊？到而家係嘛？你好後生，你好後生。哇！我60幾啦，大佬。 Oh, halo. Okay, char siu's coming out of the oven. It's been 50 minutes-ish of total cooking time over charcoal the entire time. You can see that dark black char. It's going to give it a little bit of crunch, a little bit of crispiness. That Maltose has really done what it's supposed to do. This bright red is a sign of proper charcoal grilled char siu. Chef now is going to trim a little bit of that black charcoal off because at the end of the day, the burnt bits are burnt. It's a little bit bitter. So he's going to trim it a little bit and then bring it outside for all of the world to see. First char siu of the day. Wow, 好靚啊！你睇下，哇，咁靚，正啊！
我整嚿爽你食啊！啊，呢個
第一刀啊！哇 ，sorry, can't wait. And we can take a look at how Chef is cutting it. Actually, this cutting of the char siu is so important because he is the selector. He's a curator of the meat experience. Chef here is going to make a plate of all 4 cuts just for us to see the difference in texture. But the key to getting the type of char siu that you want is to communicate and tell them how fatty you want it, and if you really know what the specific cut of char siu you like is. How many song 啊？爽叉 snappy 第一刀 first cut. Shit. I should know exactly what this tastes like because I've been eating here for so long, but that is just, it doesn't get better than this. I'm so glad we shoot in the morning. First char siu that comes out of the oven and we get it. So snappy, so sweet. Just so like, it's not honey. Like, if you imagine eating like a whole spoon of honey, it's so sweet, but the Maltose is like such a gentle glaze. For most people, first timers here, best thing to order is if you can get it, 第一刀 first cut. That snappiness in this pork is really, really special. There's only 2 pieces of this in each pig, which means that it's a very, very special, juicy, but snappy experience. Here it's called Sam Lap Cha, 3-bit char siu. 3 pieces of lean meat with tendon and fat in between. If you want something a little bit leaner, less fatty, the lean pork at Sun Guai Hung, tender. Okay, well, I haven't seen this cut in many other places. This rib cap, it's encased, it's a meat encased with a little bit of tendon that gives it a little bit chew and then fat. When you eat this, it just melts away. For Cantonese people, Chinese people in general, fatty but not greasy is really important. You can taste it melt away, but it's not cloying. It doesn't hang onto your palate too much. Perhaps this is me being biased, but as a Hong Kong person, Hong Kong really has perfected Cantonese barbecue. They've made it popular, they've made it democratic. A lot of places have made it really, really consistent. But just in this store alone, the cuts and the type of marinade that they use is proprietary. These names, Yat Pin Tin, Sam Lap Cha, all of these things come specifically from this store. There's still this innovation that had happened in the last 60, 70 years in Hong Kong. Now, the cooking of these meats is really complicated, so we don't do this at home. You get them at shops. This is called a siu mei po, a Cantonese barbecue shop, where they have the duck, the chicken, the goose, the roast pork, the barbecue pork. Now it's about like 10:30. All of the Taiwan neighborhood locals are starting to come get their meats for the day. 叫個飯啊，唔該。好啊。叉雞飯。叉燒要半肥瘦嘅，同埋加啲薑蓉啊，唔該。好。正，哇，咁靚嘅。I know this episode is all about char siu, but the real lunch, Cantonese barbecue lunch, is a deep khao fan plate of rice with char siu and chicken, bak chip gai.
Char siu in its full, proper presentation is best served over rice.
And that's Sun Guai Hung, arguably the best char siu in Hong Kong. It's the best because, number 1, the freshness of the pork, number 2, the technique, and number 3, perhaps most importantly, the negotiation between the customer preference and the specificity at which they cut their pork. That's the texture and that's the flavor, all in control through discussion of the customer with the people who are cooking. One of the best experiences we've had in Hong Kong so far. On to the next.